Welcome to All the F Words,
a podcast where two writer friends, nearly 30 years apart, explore everything we give an F about. I'm Gabby Moskowitz.
And I'm Joanne Green. On each episode of All the F Words, we focus on a theme starting with the letter F. Things like folly, farsightedness, and felonies.
We'll share stories from our lives and our distinct generational perspectives, and we'll look to the experts for insights and ideas.
Today we're talking about FOMO, an acronym that stands for the fear of missing out. I admit it, I suffer from it. Not to the extent that it keeps me up at night, mind you, but just that I have a tough time turning down invitations.
FOMO is a real affliction for some people, and social media has certainly turned up the heat.
Today we will explore FOMO in all its forms, and we'll focus on strategies for dealing with it.
Joanne, how long has FOMO actually been a named condition?
Well, the idea, of course, isn't new. In fact, it's actually referenced in ancient texts. But the term was coined in a 1996 research paper by, of all things, a marketing strategist, Dr. Dan Herman. And then it gained popularity in a major way in 2004 when Facebook was launched. So since the advent of social media, FOMO is amplified, and it's been studied as a result by a lot of people.
What's the big change?
Do you know how much time the average person spends a day on social media? It's painful.
I don't know if I want to know.
Tell me. You guess? What would you guess?
2 hours.
It's a number. You're darn close. It's 147 minutes a day.
Oh my God.
That is crazy. It's crazy. And when you think about what you're doing during that time, okay, well, we will get into it. So now people are being bombarded by the highlights of their friends' lives. And so they're like thinking that that's really what their lives are like because they're seeing these highlight moments, these moments that people choose to share where everything looks phenomenal, rainbows and flowers. And you can't help but compare your life to that. And you can't ever measure up. Who could measure up?
Because people only post the perfect moments, like that's the only thing that's happening in their lives.
Right. And for some people, it becomes a competition. So what is normal has completely been altered. And so there's so many things about this. One is that you feel like this is how you know what's going on in people's lives when of course you don't. An interesting thing happened to me just yesterday. My nephew, with whom I'm pretty close, but I don't talk to that often. He lives in Phoenix area, read my memoir and he said, I thought I knew everything that was going on in your life. And I can't believe all these things that happened for years that I never knew about. And it really made me think about how we get these snippets either on social media or even in phone calls or whatever, and we then extrapolate and think we know the whole story. We fill in the blanks. And what social media has really done to change all this is that we think we're in touch with all these people. We think that because we follow someone and we know that they just went on a trip somewhere, that we know how they are and that we've had a meaningful connection with them. In fact, we haven't.
Yeah, your brain gets tricked.
Really tricked. And why we spend on average 147 minutes a day, that is so appalling to me, I can barely even repeat the number, is because in most cases, I think, well, it's entertaining for sure, but I think a lot of it is motivated by a sense that you might be missing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think your motivation is for spending, and I won't even ask you how much time you spend a day on social media.
I'm sure it's close to that. I mean, I got to say, I have really started to lose some interest in some of the more, I don't know, let's say traditional social media forms. I used to love Facebook. I used to think Facebook was so much fun, but more and more I've been falling away from that. And then Twitter is I'm verified on Twitter. I've been on Twitter for a really long time, and it used to be the place that I went. But
what does that mean? You're verified on Twitter?
Oh, there's a blue check next to my name. Oh,
Get
this
out
is
of
funny.
town!
Yeah, well, I am verified on Twitter, and then also my blog's fan page is verified on Facebook because it has like 30,000 followers. But then on Twitter, I think I have like 9,600 something. But
have you told them about our podcast? Those 9,000 fans of yours?
I have. Oh yeah, I tell them all the time. But and who knows how many of them are bots? And I don't know if you've heard, but Twitter's not doing so hot right now. But
there is a rumor to that effect.
But it's changed a lot. I think a lot of people have started to lose interest in a lot of these platforms as as their leadership has changed, and also as things like TikTok have been introduced, which are I just find them not. I've created some TikToks, but as a consumer, I am so much more interested in TikTok. And it's interesting. I'm sure there's definitely tons of FOMO, but I'm sure I'm like a old lady. Like I'm old for TikTok. I'm totally old for TikTok. Most of the users are like teenagers or Gen Z, people in their 20s, early 20s. But
notice my silence here.
But what I find is that the TikToks that do best are the ones where somebody really seems like a real person, and as opposed to this hyper polished. It's just an interesting distinction. It's different from, I think Instagram is really where this polished perfect moments thing kind of came from, especially in the world of influencers. Posting these shots of their perfect families and perfect fashion. Another thing that's changed, I think we've talked about this a little bit, but I have pretty much stopped posting my kids on social media, and a lot of other people have started moving in that direction. It'll be interesting to see the impact that has on FOMO, because for a while there was this trend of either if you were actually like a mommy blogger, or just the way that people who weren't necessarily creating content for pay for social media, but they were very influenced by it, were posting these like perfect pictures of their perfect children. And that has just come out to be full of all kinds of problems, in addition to the fact that it sends a message about how perfect life is, when really those of us with children know that you spend a lot of time with, flower handprints on your butt and spit up on your shirt and a messy house.
And a screaming child, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially that screaming child who you're trying to get to pose for a photo.
I know, right? Ugh.
In an outfit that isn't comfortable. So
Exactly.
Here's the thing. It isn't just FOMO. There's a whole bunch of things that have resulted from this, really looking at this sort of thing. One of them is something called Fomo, which is fear of better options. Mm-hmm. So this refers to fearing that you're missing out on potentially better alternatives. And, it immediately makes me think of the folks, and I know you know them, and I know everyone listening has had this experience where you see someone at a party and you're trying to connect with them and you're looking into their eyes and they're scanning the room to see if there's anybody.
Looking over your shoulder?
Right? Checking out to see if there's anybody more important that they should go talk to. So fear of better options. There's MOMO, which is the mystery of missing out. This refers to fearing that you're missing out, but not having any clues about what you're missing out on.
That sounds exhausting.
ROMO, as opposed to ROMO, the reality of missing out. This refers to knowing that you aren't missing out on anything.
I think I have that.
Then and we'll get to that, there's FOGI, fear of joining in, the fear of sharing things on social media, but having nobody respond. A friend of mine the other day said she'd been getting a lot of responses to these questions she'd been posting. And then on day 3 or day 5, she posted a question and one person responded, and she had a panic moment. Of course, I then went and checked to respond, and a whole bunch of people had responded in the interim. But what is that about? Not getting a response. So,
Yeah.
and then there's something that I think you might experience sometimes, which is called JOMO, the joy of missing out.
Oh, yeah.
This is the opposite of FOMO and refers to positive feelings about missing out or disconnecting from social media. So tell us about that, Gabby.
Yeah. It's a little close to our fentanyl episode for me to be making this joke, but a comedian named John Mulaney has this line about how canceling plans is like heroin. Like canceling plans and not having to go out is like, he talks about how when kids are little, they are just complaining all the time about how there's nothing to do, and how miserable it is to not have done anything all day. But adults who don't have to do anything all day, it's like the greatest thing ever. And I totally relate to that. And I think I was thinking about this morning in preparation for this episode. I actually think I probably did have some kind of FOMO earlier in my life. But when I am married to somebody with very bad FOMO, and he has fear of better options, not really when it comes to people, but I remember when we used to go to coffee shops. Evan takes coffee very seriously, not just, it's like a whole thing in his family. They call it Joe time and the ritual of Joe time. It's like this Wolkenstein lore. And so we would have coffee. He has tea in the morning, and then afternoon coffee is like this big deal. And so we would go to cafes wherever we were, if we were traveling or when we lived in San Francisco at home. This is before we had children, mostly before we got married.
Now he probably drinks coffee in the morning.
Yeah. Not only did he have to have the perfect cup of coffee, the perfect temperature, the perfect amount of cream, all of that, he had to find the most perfect seat in the cafe, like the most perfect table in the cafe. And then he needed the most perfect seat in the cafe. And you want to know when this stopped? When I got pregnant with our oldest daughter, and all of a sudden, his endless, I'm telling you, Joanne, not only have I had to go to multiple cafes on the same street so that he can find the perfect one, but I have had to stand with him while he waits for somebody to get up from a table so that we can have this perfect, it's like crazy. So I think that I developed, so when I got pregnant with Anna, I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm uncomfortable. We're sitting down. Go get your coffee. I have to drink decaf. So get this over with. I think I have developed, because he would get, I've talked about the drum circle thing before. He would hear the sound of drum beats and then want to run off to the drum circle. And I would be like, oh, this is going to be so annoying.
Which is in fact, folks, true, but it's also a great metaphor. I just love it both ways, literally and metaphorically. Go on.
Oh, thank you. So anyway, I think that I have developed, in addition to getting older and having kids and just being, more stretched more thinly than normally or than I was before, I have what I call FOBA, which is fear of being annoyed. He starts to get excited. He gets some idea that there's going to be some awesome thing, and it's change. He's also older. He also has children. But I think that as we were adapting to each other, I also didn't used to be as organized as we are now, but he's not naturally very organized. And it was well, we can't both be disorganized. Your disorganization's making me crazy. So I had to become organized. And I think as we have evolved together, he's got less FOMO than he used to, but his FOMO, I think, really made me enjoy the heroin high of canceling plans. Not having to go and do something now is just so great to me. But it's taken me, in general, I would be high on the FOMO scale, particularly from someone of my age. I attribute that in part to being the baby of the family and having grown always left out.
Yeah, I always felt like, I was being sent up to bed, and my bedroom was in what was essentially the attic. So I was sent off to Siberia, and I could hear conversations that were happening downstairs, but not really, television shows that people were excited about that I wasn't allowed to watch. Yeah. So I think that's in part the genesis of my FOMO, but definitely I find that as I get older, I realize that, on balance, experiences are not what I think they're going to be. And that what is a good time and what is essential for my happiness has, I've become more realistic, I guess is the simplest way to put it. When we talk about FOMO, the fear of missing out and what social media has created, in fact, a monster here, really what we should be talking about is adolescence, because that is where the highest risk is found, and not only the highest risk for FOMO, but the highest risk for what that FOMO can lead to, which is a whole lot. A number of studies have been done. It can contribute to peer pressure. It can lead teens to engage in risky behaviors that they might have otherwise avoided because they think that's what everyone is doing and that's what's expected of them, or that is what is criteria for entry into the in group or the popular circle. Because the teenage brain is still developing, teens often engage in behaviors and actions without considering the consequences or the lasting effects or the actual risks. And this is just brain development, right?
Yeah.
It's not that they're being stupid or they're being immature. It is literally their brain doesn't work in that way.
Ask anyone with a lower back tattoo. They'll tell you lack of brain health.
That's very funny. Another thing that I read that I thought was super interesting, and as a mother of daughters, you'll find this interesting. Girls experiencing depression tend to use social networking sites at a greater rate, while for boys, anxiety was a bigger trigger for greater social media use.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
So like girls experiencing depression, like sort of self-medicate by going
Exactly.
on?
Exactly. They think it will make them feel better the same way. And I love your choice of words, because often people will drink when they're depressed. Alcohol's a depressant.
Yeah.
Often people will smoke dope when they're depressed. Marijuana is a depressant.
I just want to remind you, dope is usually, I think we talked about this last time, or maybe we've talked about it. Dope is usually, when people say dope, they're talking about, not to bring up heroin twice in this episode, but.
Are you shaming me?
No, just catching you up.
Okay.
Weed work.
And let me just say, Gabby, you used the word pot, and that totally dated you last week.
Everyone says pot.
It's weed. You used the word weed. We digress. In any case, yes, I think depressed girls go online in an effort to cheer themselves up or make them feel better, and invariably that will exacerbate the depression. Of course, because what are they seeing? And let's face it, girls can be mean.
That is true. Girls are.
I'm not sure what that's about.
I think girls are mean in a way that lends itself to social media, probably more in a more concrete way than boys are mean. Boys tend to be aggressive, and don't get me wrong, I have been aggressed by all kinds of assholes on social media, particularly Twitter. But the way that women are mean, especially, I kind of started on social media before there was or after I was too old for middle school and high school bullying. But the way that girls are mean, as I recall from my middle school and high school years, the in-person bullying I definitely experienced, would have been so much worse if it could have continued all night long online.
Aren't you grateful that you didn't have it when you were growing up?
Every day. I saw this TikTok recently where high school boys were interviewing each other about who the hottest girl in their class was. And I have never been more grateful to not have had social media when I was growing up. But anyway, the way that girls are made this sort of subtle and, it's so cute how you'll just wear anything, like that kind of thing, that on social media, just terrible.
In a minute, we will be talking about symptoms of FOMO, and this is of particular interest, I think, to parents who want to be sure that if their kids are experiencing FOMO, there are things that they can do to mitigate the damage. The fear of missing out, or FOMO as it is affectionately called, is what we are discussing today on All the F Words. She's Gabby Moskowitz, and I'm Joanne Green. And here are some symptoms of FOMO. Obsessively checking social media to see what others are doing, right? Experiencing negative feelings when comparing one's life to what others seem to be doing on social media. And seem to be doing is sort of the operative phrase there because, right?
I had a therapist once say, you should never compare your insides to somebody else's outsides. And I think about that a lot.
I love that. I love that. I had a therapist once, or actually it was my sister's therapist, but she repeated it, and I've kept it front and center ever since, which is this difference between thoughts and facts, or feelings and facts. Is that a feeling, or is that reality? And I think when we make assumptions about what we see on social media, we should use that litmus test. Is this really what this person's life is like, or is this what they're trying to present as what their life is like?
Or is it even just a moment of their day versus all the other moments in their day?
I think we should make bumper stickers that say, "Stop extrapolating."
I think that is very useful in a lot of different areas of life.
Right? So here's some more symptoms of FOMO. Feeling mentally exhausted from social media. This is a big one for me, overscheduling. Trying to be everywhere at all times. This is a big problem for me, always has been. I, of course, double booked for 9:30 this morning. I also told a friend of mine in Israel that we could do a Zoom at 9:30, and Fred kindly pointed out that we were recording, as I knew. But, heaven forbid I looked at the calendar. Withdrawing from others is a symptom of FOMO, not mine, obviously. Feeling physically tired, also not mine. Feeling sad, anxious, or depressed. Well, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Was FOMO the result of feeling anxious or depressed or sad, or the other way around? Difficulty concentrating, which can, of course, be a symptom of all sorts of things. And having trouble sleeping, which can also, where do you begin on that one, right? Having trouble sleeping could be from anything. So really what we want to focus on is, what do you do? Right? What do you do to treat FOMO short of,
You know what I think you do?
What do you think?
You go to one of these things that you think is going to be so cool, or you go over to the house of that person who seems to have this perfect life, and then you face reality, which is that the thing you wanted to go to is not nearly as cool, and the person's house, has a disaster room where all of their cardboard boxes and crap and things that are not in their beautiful, perfect white kitchen pictures is stashed. And you think of that every time you, my almost 5-year-old has been really working hard on dealing with disappointment. And one of the things she does is it's so funny, and I'm not sure whether to encourage it or not, but I can tell it's the coping mechanism she's developing, and it works for her. She will come up with a little reason in her head why something, clearly, based on what I just said, she must have gotten it from me. She'll come up with a little reason why something that she's wanting but knows she's not going to get is actually not that cool. So
I think it sounds great. It's a great coping mechanism.
One of my favorite memories of this was we were going to go. She really loves one of her friends' dads. There's always a dad that Anna is really excited about. And she loves this dad. And we were going to go, he was having a birthday party, and we were going to go to the dad's birthday party. It was like lots of families. And we had just been to Trader Joe's, and she wanted to bring all of the snacks that we brought. And I said, we can't bring the snacks. I'm sorry, Anna. The snacks are going to stay here. They're going to have food at the party. It's fine. And she was really upset. And then she said, okay, well, maybe the dad's name is Hung. She said, maybe he doesn't like spicy food, and maybe the snacks would be too spicy for him. And so it wouldn't be good to bring them. She comes up with like a little story to calm herself down about the things she was anticipating. And
she sounds like a guru to me, Gabby. She's a guru. So. I think that we should all learn from her.
Yeah.
Right? The wisdom of 4-year-olds. Social psychologists or whatever say we should change our focus. So when you're focusing on things that are making you feel like you're missing out, for instance, figure out your triggers. So if your triggers are seeing people in great outfits that look great, stop looking at people in great outfits. I'm being really sort of banal about this, but figure out who are the positive people in your life, right? Who are the people that make you feel good? Who are the positive people in your feed? Very specifically, you can delete people. You can stop following people who continually make you feel inferior or as though you're missing out.
There was a study, I don't know if this came up in what you were looking at, but there was a study in, and I came across this when I was researching for our fat phobia episode. When we add, people have this tendency to follow just beautiful, thin, famous, influencers, actresses, etc. But when you consciously make a point of, if you're struggling with body image and you consciously make a point of following women of all different sizes and all different backgrounds, it actually has an impact on your brain and your self-image.
I love that.
People start to see themselves more positively when they aren't exclusively comparing themselves to, people with stereotypically, traditionally perfect, quote unquote, bodies.
I think that's great. Digital detox is not just a concept. It is something that you can do. And if not fully, then you can delete certain triggering apps. You can also set a timer and limit the amount of time. Maybe you decide that 2 hours is ridiculous and you should only spend a maximum of 1 hour a day on social media, and you can actually time yourself. Also, and I need to just throw this in because you and I both, I think, aspire in some fashion to actually observe this idea of Sabbath, and you can actually take a day out of your 7 days and unplug. So little commercial there. And if you want to know more about that, it's reboot.org, which will tell you all about how to unplug 1 day a week. You can keep a journal and shift from public approval to private satisfaction. So how about that? Instead of needing this random anonymous applause of how many likes you get, maybe write a journal and see how sharing your feelings with a piece of paper or yourself can actually make you feel better about yourself. Make more personal connections rather than online connections. Actually look into people's faces and have meaningful interactions. Gratitude is my number one go-to when feeling lousy. It's really hard to feel badly for yourself and feel grateful at the same time. And as trite as it sounds, counting your blessings works. Literally stopping and thinking, what am I grateful for? Starting the day that way, ending the day that way. In the middle of the day, just instead of allowing the frustrations to mount or feel like your life isn't as good as what you wish it were, think about the ways in which it's great and what you have. And you don't need to tell anybody, and you don't need to post it. Or if you want to post it. Maybe you'll inspire somebody.
One thing that I was thinking about as we've been recording this episode is there are kind of two groups, and it's a spectrum, so people fall into different places, but there are kind of two groups that this this affects both in different ways if you're participating in social media. One group is people who grew up with social media. I'm in that weird category of, old millennial where I didn't grow up with social media, but I had, was on the internet young enough that I went through high school and college knowing how to use it, and then was an early adopter of social media. But so for people who grew up with it, it's just kind of baked into their sense of validation is public perception. But then there are people, like I would imagine you, who did not grow up with it at all, with social media. And then as an adult who had gone a long number of years, not with public interaction, you were in media, but, you weren't getting up on a soapbox in front of all of your friends on a regular basis and having access to their responses. I would imagine that is a whole thing. And all of a sudden, people who you never really had any reason to stay in touch with, suddenly, I think about this sometimes when I find myself going down, all of a sudden, somebody makes a comment somewhere and all of a sudden I'm having feelings about someone who was, not very nice to me in my biology class in 10th grade and what they had to say about something I posted. That's so crazy. People used to have to do that. It used to be, you used to have to take in thoughts and feelings of people who you, for better or for worse, just didn't really care about. And so I think that also remembering that this isn't really how the world was originally set up. And our brains are not really made to have to deal with this.
Not at all. I mean, there are definitely pluses. It's great to be able to get in touch with people who from your past who you haven't been in touch with. And but again, what do we know? We know just a few little facts that we, glean from a message here and a photo there. The other thing that I think that I'm finding difficult is that in 2023 and certainly beyond, the way it is absolutely essential that you have a presence on social media if you're trying to market yourself, your business.
Yeah.
In my case, my book. And so it isn't a natural thing for me to post. I was absolutely raised to not promote myself. I mean, I was taught very, very clearly that was being conceited. It's a word we don't even hear anymore, but the whole notion of self-promotion was anathema. I mean, that's the last thing in the world you wanted to do. You would be, considered bad in so many realms. And yet now it is really essential. And so I think we're in a strange moment in time. And I think we need to look critically for ourselves and certainly for our children and grandchildren at social media and what the impact of it is on our self-esteem, on our moods, on our allocation of time, and make sure that it doesn't take over, because FOMO is real. The fear of missing out is very real. Thanks so much for listening today. You can find out more about Gabby by going where? Can we send people to your website or something, or follow you?
Yeah, I'm not blogging that much lately, but you can go to @GabbyMoskowitz on Twitter. What's fun, since the new changes in Twitter, they've added Twitter Blue, which is where anybody can have a verification check mark. But those of us who had verification check marks before I got a verification check mark because my book was a bestseller on Amazon and I had a TV show. So that way nobody can impersonate me. But now if you click on that blue check mark, it says this, because they've added this Twitter Blue thing that you have to pay for. If you weren't already verified, it says this person has a legacy verification check mark and they may or may not still be notable, which I love. So if you want to find out whether or not I'm still notable, go to Twitter.
I always knew you were a cool kid, Gabby.
Let's say who we are, and then we'll talk about where our podcast is on social media.
Well, I am highly unverifiable, and I'm Joanne Green, and my website, which I invite you to visit, is joanne-green.com. Super simple. Don't forget the dash. And then check out all the F words. We're everywhere on social media. Gabby will tell you the details.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Not verified, but, give us time. And we also have email. So email us at allthefwordspod@gmail.com. Tell us everything that you don't want to post on social media. We want to hear about it.
Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.